The desert wind carried secrets that day, whispering through the abandoned compound where shadows danced between crumbling walls and broken dreams. Staff Sergeant Maria Castellanos had been told she was there to observe, to learn, to stay quiet and take notes while the real warriors did their work. But when the moment came, when everything hung in the balance and failure meant losing innocent lives, the Marine sniper would make a decision that would change everything they thought they knew about precision, courage, and who deserves to hold the trigger when it matters most. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun blazed mercilessly over Forward Operating Base Serpent, turning the concrete barriers into furnaces and the metal watchtowers into monuments of heat that shimmered against the barren landscape. Dust devils danced across the compound's perimeter, kicking up clouds of grit that settled into every crease of uniform fabric and every gap between body armor plates. The air tasted of diesel fuel, sweat, and the metallic tang of weapons oil that clung to everything like a second skin. Maria stepped out of the armored transport, her boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a solid thud that seemed to announce her arrival to no one in particular. The vehicle's engine ticked as it cooled, adding its rhythm to the constant hum of generators and the distant chatter of radio communications that never stopped in places like this. Her gear was practical, worn from months of deployment, each piece chosen for function over form. The rifle case slung across her shoulder bore the scuffs and scratches of someone who had carried it through real missions, not training exercises. Around her, the forward operating base bustled with the controlled chaos of military efficiency. Soldiers moved with purpose between buildings, their movements sharp and deliberate. Helicopters sat on the landing pad like sleeping metal birds, their rotors tied down against the wind that never seemed to stop blowing across this forgotten corner of the desert. Everything here served a purpose, and everyone had a role to play in the machine of modern warfare. The sniper team was easy to spot. They occupied the southeast corner of the base, near the elevated observation post that gave them clear sightlines across the valley below. Their area was marked by the precision of their setup, rifles arranged with military exactness, scopes covered against the dust, and ammunition sorted with the kind of attention to detail that meant the difference between mission success and catastrophe. These men had earned their positions through years of training, countless hours of practice, and the kind of mental fortitude that allowed them to make impossible shots when lives hung in the balance. Staff Sergeant Jake Morrison commanded the team with the easy confidence of someone who had been doing this job long enough to make it look effortless. His rifle, a custom-built precision instrument worth more than most people's cars, rested on its bipod like a sleeping predator. Morrison's reputation preceded him wherever he went. 200 confirmed kills, missions across 3 different theaters of operation, and the kind of steady hands that could put a bullet through a quarter at 800 meters. His team members looked up to him with the respect reserved for legends, and he wore that responsibility with the quiet dignity of a professional who understood the weight of his work. Sergeant Tommy Brooks worked alongside Morrison, his role as spotter requiring a different kind of precision, but no less skill. Brooks had eyes like a hawk and the patience of a monk, capable of lying motionless for hours while tracking targets through his scope. His calculations were legendary among the unit, able to account for wind, temperature, humidity, and a dozen other variables that could turn a perfect shot into a tragic miss. Together, Morrison and Brooks formed a partnership that had saved countless lives and completed missions that others deemed impossible. Corporal Danny Sullivan rounded out the core team, younger than the others but no less dedicated. Sullivan handled communications and backup spotting, his youth offset by an intensity that burned bright in everything he did. He maintained their equipment with obsessive care, cleaned their weapons until they gleamed, and absorbed knowledge from his senior partners like a sponge soaking up water. Sullivan represented the future of precision shooting, eager to prove himself worthy of the trust placed in him. When Maria approached their position, the conversation died with the abruptness of a door slamming shut. Morrison looked up from his rifle maintenance, his expression neutral, but his eyes carrying the weight of evaluation. Brooks continued cleaning his spotting scope, but his movements slowed as he assessed this newcomer. Sullivan stopped what he was doing entirely, uncertain how to react to the presence of someone who clearly didn't belong in their carefully ordered world. The silence stretched between them like a chasm, filled with unspoken questions and assumptions. Maria's orders had been clear. Observe the sniper team's operations, learn their procedures, and compile a report on their effectiveness for the brass back at headquarters. She was here as an analyst, not a participant, a fact that had been made abundantly clear during her briefing. Her role was to watch, listen, and document, nothing more. The real work would be done by the professionals who had earned their place through blood, sweat, and years of dedicated service. Morrison finally broke the silence, his voice carrying the authority of rank and experience. "You must be Castellanos," he said, not quite a question, but not quite a statement either. "Heard you were coming to check up on us." His tone remained professional, but underneath lay a current of skepticism that spoke to every soldier's wariness of outsiders judging their work. "Hope you brought something to keep you busy, because this job involves a lot of waiting around." Brooks glanced up from his scope, adding his own assessment to the conversation. "Most people get bored pretty quick out here," he observed, his voice carrying the dry humor of someone who had seen plenty of visitors come and go. "Not much excitement in watching us clean weapons and call wind speeds all day." His smile was polite but distant, the kind reserved for temporary guests who would be gone soon enough. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Sullivan remained quiet, following the lead of his seniors but clearly curious about this unexpected addition to their routine. He had arranged their gear with meticulous care, every item in its designated place, every tool ready for immediate use. The presence of an observer disrupted that careful order in ways that made him uncomfortable, though he tried not to let it show. Maria nodded acknowledgement of their greetings, understanding the dynamic at play without taking offense. She had expected this reception, had prepared herself for the subtle resistance that came with being an outsider in a world built on trust and proven capability. "I'll stay out of your way," she assured them, settling her gear in a spot that wouldn't interfere with their operations. "Just pretend I'm not here." The morning progressed with the slow rhythm of professional military work. Morrison and Brooks conducted their equipment checks with the thoroughness of people whose lives depended on their tools working perfectly. Every scope was calibrated, every rifle zeroed, every piece of gear inspected for the smallest sign of wear or damage. Sullivan assisted with the kind of eager efficiency that marked him as someone still proving himself, still earning his place among these elite operators. Their conversation flowed around Maria as if she were invisible, discussing wind patterns and target acquisition with the casual expertise of masters at work. Morrison shared stories from previous missions, each tale carefully chosen to illustrate a lesson or principle that might prove valuable in future operations. Brooks contributed his own experiences, filling in details that painted a picture of the complex calculations required for long-range precision shooting. Sullivan listened intently, occasionally asking questions that demonstrated his growing understanding of the craft. The base around them hummed with constant activity. Patrol teams prepared for missions into the surrounding terrain, their gear checked and double-checked before departure. Supply convoys arrived and departed, bringing the materials needed to sustain operations in this remote outpost. Communications specialists monitored radio traffic, coordinating between units spread across hundreds of square miles of hostile territory. Every person had a role, every task served a purpose, and the smooth functioning of the entire operation depended on each individual performing their duties with precision and dedication. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became more oppressive, radiating off the concrete and metal surfaces until the entire base felt like the inside of an oven. Soldiers moved more slowly, conserving energy for when it would be needed most. Water consumption increased, and the medical staff prepared for the inevitable cases of heat exhaustion that came with desert operations. The sniper team adapted to these conditions with the ease of long experience, adjusting their routines to account for the environmental challenges. Morrison demonstrated the effects of heat on ballistics, explaining how temperature changes affected bullet trajectory and required constant recalculation of firing solutions. Brooks showed how Mirage could distort target images, making accurate range estimation nearly impossible without proper technique and experience. Sullivan took notes on everything, building his knowledge base for the day when he would need to apply these lessons under pressure. Their professionalism was evident in every aspect of their work. These men had dedicated their lives to mastering their craft, and it showed in the smooth efficiency of their movements, the automatic checks and procedures that had become second nature, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing they could perform when called upon. They spoke in the shorthand of experts, using terminology that reflected years of shared experience and training. Maria watched it all, taking her own notes in the margins of her official observation forms. She recorded their procedures, documented their equipment maintenance protocols, and began to understand the complex interplay of factors that went into successful long-range shooting. But she also observed things that wouldn't make it into her formal report. The way Morrison's hands never quite relaxed, even during downtime. The intensity with which Brooks studied every environmental condition, the hunger for knowledge that drove Sullivan to ask questions that his seniors clearly appreciated. The morning briefing came over the radio, crackling with static and the professional urgency that marked all military communications. Intelligence had identified a potential target in the valley below, a high-value individual whose capture or elimination could significantly impact ongoing operations. The sniper team was tasked with surveillance and, if the opportunity presented itself, neutralization of the threat. It was exactly the kind of mission they had trained for, the moment when all their preparation would be put to the ultimate test. Morrison acknowledged the briefing with the calm professionalism that had made him legendary among his peers. Brooks immediately began setting up his spotting equipment, checking wind conditions, and calculating range to the suspected target area. Sullivan prepared communication gear and backup systems, ensuring they could maintain contact with command throughout the operation. Each man moved with the fluid coordination of a team that had worked together long enough to anticipate each other's needs. The target zone lay nearly a kilometer away, across terrain that offered multiple positions but also presented significant challenges. The wind patterns were complex, affected by the valley's shape and the heating of different surfaces throughout the day. Distance measurements would be critical, requiring the kind of precision that separated true professionals from merely competent shooters. Environmental conditions would change throughout the mission, demanding constant adjustment and recalculation. Maria found herself positioned where she could observe their work without interfering, her notebook ready to document procedures that would become part of her official assessment. She had expected to spend the day watching routine maintenance and training exercises, not a real-world operation with actual stakes. The shift in atmosphere was palpable, transforming these soldiers from instructors demonstrating techniques into warriors preparing for battle. As the team settled into their positions and began the patient work of surveillance and target acquisition, Maria realized she was about to witness something extraordinary. These men weren't just skilled technicians, they were artists of precision, masters of a craft that demanded perfection because failure meant consequences too terrible to accept. She prepared to document their work, having no idea that before the day was over, she would become part of the story rather than merely its observer. The desert wind continued to whisper its secrets, carrying the scent of dust and distant storms, while somewhere in the valley below, events were already in motion that would test everything these soldiers thought they knew about courage, precision, and who deserved to pull the trigger when innocent lives hung in the balance. The radio crackled to life with the urgent whisper of intelligence updates, cutting through the desert air like a blade through silence. Morrison pressed his earpiece closer, his weathered face growing more serious with each transmission. The target had been confirmed. A high-value insurgent leader responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout the region. Intelligence suggested he would be meeting with local cell commanders in a compound approximately 900 meters across the valley, a distance that pushed the boundaries of what most snipers considered manageable under these conditions. Brooks was already behind his spotting scope, glass trained on the distant buildings that shimmered in the heat like mirages dancing on the horizon. His voice carried the calm precision of someone who had done this hundreds of times before, calling out observations in the clipped terminology that made life-and-death decisions sound like routine weather reports. Building complex, two-story structure, multiple entry points, civilian activity in the surrounding area. Each word was carefully chosen, painting a tactical picture for Morrison, who remained focused on his rifle setup. Sullivan monitored communication channels with the intensity of someone who understood that information could change everything in an instant. His fingers moved across radio controls with practiced efficiency, maintaining contact with command elements, aerial surveillance, and ground units positioned throughout the operational area. The weight of coordination pressed down on him, but he carried it with the determined focus of a professional who refused to let his team down when it mattered most. Maria positioned herself where she could observe their procedures without interfering with their work, her notebook ready to document the techniques that would form the basis of her assessment report. She had expected to witness training exercises and equipment demonstrations, not a real-world operation where success or failure could impact the broader mission. The transformation in atmosphere was immediate and profound, changing these soldiers from instructors explaining concepts into warriors preparing for actual combat. Morrison's rifle setup was a masterpiece of military engineering and personal customization. Every component had been selected through years of experience, each modification tested under the harshest conditions imaginable. The scope glass was crystal clear despite the harsh environment, protected by custom-fitted covers that bore the scratches and wear marks of countless missions. His shooting position was established with the methodical care of someone who understood that comfort and stability directly translated to accuracy when the moment of truth arrived. The wind patterns across the valley presented a complex puzzle that would challenge even the most experienced marksman. Air currents flowed differently at various elevations, affected by the heating of different surface types throughout the day. Brooks tracked these changes with the dedication of a scientist studying natural phenomena, his calculations accounting for variables that could turn a perfect shot into a tragic miss. Temperature differentials created thermal layers that bent light and altered ballistic trajectories in ways that required constant adjustment and compensation. As the morning progressed, civilian activity in the target area increased, adding layers of complexity to an already challenging situation. Women carried water jugs between buildings, children played in dusty courtyards, and merchants set up small stalls along the narrow streets. Any potential engagement would require absolute precision to avoid civilian casualties, a constraint that made an already difficult shot nearly impossible. The margin for error approached zero, demanding the kind of perfection that separated legendary marksmen from merely skilled shooters. Intelligence updates continued to flow through Sullivan's communication equipment, each transmission adding pieces to an evolving tactical puzzle. Aerial surveillance confirmed the presence of multiple vehicles at the target compound, suggesting that the anticipated meeting was indeed taking place. Electronic intercepts provided fragments of conversation that intelligence analysts were working to decode, searching for confirmation of the high-value target's presence. Time pressure began to build as mission parameters shifted with each new piece of information. Morrison adjusted his position minutely, seeking the perfect balance between stability and mobility that would allow him to maintain accuracy while remaining ready to relocate if circumstances demanded. His breathing had settled into the rhythm of someone preparing for action, each inhale and exhale controlled with the precision of a meditation master. Years of training had taught him to manage his heartbeat, to find the natural pause between contractions when his pulse would least affect his aim. Every physiological system was being optimized for the moment when he would need to deliver lethal precision across nearly a kilometer of hostile terrain. Brooks continued his patient observation, documenting movement patterns and identifying potential shooting windows that might present themselves as the situation developed. His experience allowed him to read the subtle signs that preceded target exposure, the behavioral patterns that suggested when someone might step into an open area or position themselves where a clear shot would be possible. He communicated these observations in the understated language of professional spotters, each word carefully chosen to convey critical information without unnecessary drama or excitement. The heat continued to build throughout the morning, creating challenges that went far beyond simple discomfort. Mirage effects intensified, making accurate range estimation increasingly difficult, even with advanced optical equipment. Metal surfaces became too hot to touch comfortably, requiring the team to adapt their handling procedures to prevent burns or equipment damage. Ammunition heated to temperatures that could affect ballistic performance, demanding careful consideration of how environmental conditions might impact projectile flight characteristics. Maria watched the team's adaptation to these challenges with growing respect for their professionalism and dedication. These men weren't just skilled technicians operating expensive equipment. They were artists of precision who had learned to work with natural forces rather than fighting against them. Morrison demonstrated an intuitive understanding of how environmental conditions affected his weapon system, making adjustments that seemed almost mystical in their accuracy. Brooks showed the kind of patience that could only come from years of experience, maintaining focus despite the mounting pressure and uncomfortable conditions. As the tactical situation continued to develop, it became clear that this would not be a routine surveillance mission. Intelligence reports suggested that the target meeting might conclude within hours, creating a narrow window of opportunity that could close at any moment. The pressure to perform began mounting on the sniper team, though their external demeanor remained calm and professional. Each man understood that this could be their one chance to neutralize a threat that had caused tremendous damage to coalition forces and innocent civilians alike. Morrison's final equipment checks took on added significance as the possibility of actual engagement became more likely. Every scope adjustment was verified twice, every mechanical connection tested for security, every backup system confirmed ready for immediate use. His rifle had become an extension of his will, a precision instrument capable of delivering justice across impossible distances when wielded by hands trained to perfection. The responsibility of that capability weighed heavily on him, though he carried it with the quiet dignity of someone who had accepted such burdens long ago. The communication net buzzed with updates from multiple sources, creating a complex information flow that Sullivan managed with impressive skill. Ground surveillance teams reported vehicle movements, aerial platforms provided overhead imagery, and electronic intelligence assets contributed intercepts that helped build a comprehensive picture of activities at the target location. Each piece of information was filtered through experience and training, processed by minds that understood how individual details combined to create tactical opportunities. Brooks identified the optimal shooting position within their current location, a spot that offered clear sightlines to the target area, while maintaining adequate concealment from potential counter-surveillance efforts. The geometry of the shot presented challenges that would test every aspect of their training and experience. Elevation differences, wind patterns, and the extreme range combined to create conditions that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible even for elite marksmen. As afternoon approached, the tactical picture began to crystallize around a single critical moment that was rapidly approaching. Intelligence assets confirmed the presence of the high-value target at the compound, creating the kind of opportunity that justified months of preparation and training. The sniper team prepared for what could be their most important mission, understanding that success or failure would ripple outward to affect countless other operations and potentially save or cost numerous lives throughout the region. Maria found herself documenting not just procedures and techniques, but witnessing the transformation of skilled soldiers into instruments of precise justice. The weight of their responsibility was evident in every movement, every decision, every careful calculation that brought them closer to a moment when months of preparation would be tested against the harsh reality of combat conditions. She began to understand that her role as observer was providing her with insights that no training manual or classroom instruction could possibly convey. The desert wind shifted again, carrying with it the scent of distant storms and the promise of change. Somewhere in the valley below, events were reaching a critical juncture that would soon test everything these warriors believed about precision, dedication, and the courage required to act when failure was not an option. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge not only their technical skills, but their understanding of who belonged behind the rifle when innocent lives hung in the balance. Morrison settled into his final firing position, with the fluid grace of someone who had performed this ritual countless times before. His world began to narrow to the small circle of clarity visible through his scope, where distance and difficulty collapsed into the simple reality of crosshairs and target. Brooks assumed his spotting position with equal precision, ready to guide his partner through the complex calculations that would determine success or failure. Sullivan maintained his communication watch, ensuring that critical information would flow seamlessly between the team and higher command elements. The moment of truth was approaching, and everyone involved understood that the next few minutes would determine whether months of preparation had been sufficient to meet the ultimate test of their profession. The desert held its breath, waiting to witness whether human skill and dedication could triumph over impossible odds when justice demanded perfect precision delivered across nearly a kilometer of hostile terrain. The target emerged from the compound entrance at 1,347 hours, exactly as intelligence had predicted. Through his scope, Morrison could see the figure moving with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, surrounded by a small entourage of bodyguards who scanned the surrounding area with professional wariness. This was the man responsible for orchestrating attacks that had claimed dozens of coalition lives and countless innocent civilians throughout the region. The moment they had prepared for was finally at hand, but as Morrison settled behind his rifle, something went wrong. His breathing, normally as steady as a metronome during critical moments, became labored and irregular. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite years of training that had taught him to control physiological responses under pressure. The crosshairs that should have been rock steady began to waver slightly, a tremor so subtle that most observers would never notice, but devastating to a marksman who measured precision in fractions of inches at extreme range. Morrison blinked hard, trying to clear his vision, but the familiar clarity that had made him legendary among his peers remained frustratingly elusive. Brooks, watching through his spotting scope, immediately recognized the signs of his partner struggling with what every sniper feared most, the moment when the body betrayed the mind despite flawless training and preparation. "Talk to me, Morrison," he whispered, his voice carrying just enough concern to acknowledge the situation without adding pressure. The spotter had seen this before, the cruel irony of human physiology, failing at the exact moment when perfection was most desperately needed. Morrison's hands, which had delivered death with surgical precision across 3 combat deployments, trembled almost imperceptibly as he fought to regain control. The rifle that had felt like a natural extension of his body moments before now seemed foreign and unwieldy. His heartbeat, usually controlled through breathing techniques perfected over years of practice, thundered in his ears loud enough to shake his aim. The harder he fought to steady himself, the more elusive that steadiness became, creating a feedback loop of frustration that threatened to spiral beyond recovery. Sullivan monitored the communication channels with growing urgency as reports flowed in from multiple surveillance assets. The target window was closing rapidly. Aerial observers reported increased activity around the compound, suggesting that the meeting might conclude soon and the opportunity would be lost. Ground surveillance teams noted suspicious movement that could indicate counter-surveillance awareness, meaning their position might be compromised if they delayed much longer. Time was running out, and everyone knew it. Maria watched this unfolding crisis from her observation position, understanding with growing clarity that she was witnessing something far more significant than a routine training exercise or standard mission execution. These were elite professionals, the best of the best, facing the kind of challenge that no amount of training could fully prepare someone for. The moment when human limitations collided with absolute necessity. Her notebook lay forgotten as the gravity of the situation began to dawn on her. Brooks continued his patient coaching, drawing on years of partnership with Morrison to find the words that might break through the mental barriers that were sabotaging his partner's performance. "Remember, Kandahar," he whispered, referring to a mission where Morrison had made an impossible shot under similar pressure. "Same wind, same range, same steady hands that got us home." But even as he spoke the words, Brooks could see through his scope that Morrison was fighting a battle that couldn't be won through external encouragement alone. The target moved across the compound courtyard with deliberate purpose, pausing occasionally to speak with subordinates who hung on his every word. Intelligence intercepts suggested he was giving final instructions for operations that would result in significant casualties if allowed to proceed. This wasn't just another high-value target. This was someone whose continued existence would directly translate into the deaths of innocent people who depended on coalition forces for protection. The moral weight of that reality pressed down on everyone involved. Morrison's scope wavered again as another wave of physiological rebellion swept through his system. The phenomenon was well documented in sniper training literature, but poorly understood by those who hadn't experienced it firsthand. The body's stress response, perfectly calibrated for close-quarters combat or immediate physical threats, became counterproductive when absolute stillness was required. Adrenaline that should have sharpened focus instead created tremors that made precision impossible. Sullivan's voice carried new urgency as he relayed updated intelligence. "Compound security is increasing. We've got movement on the perimeter that suggests they're preparing to wrap up the meeting. Target window is maybe 10 minutes, possibly less." The communication specialist's training kept his voice professionally neutral, but everyone could hear the tension underneath. This was their one opportunity, and it was slipping away with each passing second. Brooks made a decision that violated every protocol he had ever learned about sniper team operations. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of someone who had earned the right to make desperate choices in impossible situations. "Morrison, step back. Let Castellanos take the shot." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, shocking in their implications and revolutionary in their suggestion. Morrison's head snapped up from his scope, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and something approaching relief. The suggestion was so far outside standard operating procedures that it bordered on the absurd, yet in that moment it felt like the only rational option available. "Brooks, you can't be serious. She's an observer, not a shooter. This isn't some training exercise where we can afford to experiment with unproven personnel." But Brooks had been watching Maria throughout the morning, noting details that others had missed while focused on their own responsibilities. He had seen how her eyes tracked wind indicators with the same instinctive understanding that marked natural marksmen. He had observed her unconscious adjustments to environmental conditions, the way she positioned herself to read thermal currents and mirage effects. Most importantly, he had noticed her preternatural calm in a situation that was causing seasoned professionals to show stress cracks. Maria felt the weight of their attention shift to her like a physical force. The suggestion was so unexpected, so far beyond anything she had imagined when she arrived to observe their operations, that for a moment she couldn't process what was being asked of her. The rifle that Morrison had been unable to steady represented not just a weapon, but a responsibility that could affect the lives of countless people, depending on the outcome of this single shot. Sullivan's communication equipment crackled with another update that added urgency to an already critical situation. "Target is moving toward the exit. We've got maybe 5 minutes before he's in a vehicle and gone. Command is asking for status updates." The young Marine's voice carried the stress of someone who understood that failure here would have consequences that rippled far beyond their immediate mission. Brooks continued his unprecedented argument, his voice carrying the conviction of someone who had learned to trust instincts honed by years of combat experience. "Look at her positioning, Morrison. Look at how she's been reading the wind all morning without even realizing it. She's got the natural ability that you can't teach in any school. Sometimes the person who can make the shot isn't the one with the most training. It's the one whose body isn't fighting against their mind." Morrison looked at Maria with new eyes, seeing past the observer status and analyst role to evaluate her as a potential marksman under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. What he saw surprised him: steady hands, controlled breathing, and an alertness that spoke to natural ability rather than learned technique. More importantly, she showed no signs of the physiological stress response that was currently sabotaging his own performance. Her body was treating this crisis as just another moment requiring focus and precision. The ethical implications of the decision pressed down on everyone involved. Allowing an untested observer to attempt a shot that qualified snipers were struggling with violated every principle of military procedure and common sense. Yet the alternative was watching a high-value target escape to plan operations that would cost innocent lives, a failure that would weigh on their consciences far longer than any breach of protocol. Maria found her voice, though it came out quieter than she intended. "I've never taken a shot like this in combat conditions. My experience is mostly range work, controlled environments, known distances." She wasn't declining the opportunity, but she needed them to understand exactly what they were asking and what the limitations might be. Honesty seemed more important than false confidence in a situation where lives hung in the balance. Brooks nodded, respecting her candor while maintaining his conviction that she represented their best chance for mission success. Range work teaches fundamentals, and fundamentals are what matter at extreme distance. Wind reading, breathing control, trigger discipline. Those are the skills that count when everything else falls apart. You've been demonstrating those skills all morning without even realizing it. The target paused in the compound courtyard, speaking with what appeared to be a senior subordinate. Intelligence reports suggested this might be the final coordination meeting before dispersal, making the next few minutes absolutely critical for mission success. Every second of delay reduced their chances of success, while increasing the risk of detection by counter-surveillance assets that were certainly operating in the area. Morrison made the hardest decision of his military career, stepping back from the rifle that had defined his professional identity for over a decade. "Castellanos, the weapon is yours. Brooks will spot for you. I'll coordinate with command and provide backup if needed." His voice carried the weight of someone surrendering control in the most difficult circumstances possible, yet there was also relief there, the recognition that sometimes leadership meant knowing when to step aside. Maria approached the rifle with respect, bordering on reverence, understanding that she was being handed not just a weapon, but the accumulated trust and reputation of some of the military's most elite professionals. The scope still held Morrison's settings, configured for his eye relief and shooting position, requiring immediate adjustments that could make or break any attempt at accurate fire. Every movement had to be precise, economical, designed to minimize disruption to a system that had been optimized for conditions that were rapidly changing. Brooks shifted into his spotting role with seamless professionalism, his scope trained on the target area, while his mind calculated the complex variables that would determine success or failure. Target is stationary, approximately 870 meters, slight wind from the northwest, temperature rising, mirage building from the valley floor. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who had guided countless shots under pressure, though never under circumstances quite like these. As Maria settled behind the rifle, feeling the unfamiliar weight and balance of the weapon system, she realized that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. All the range time, all the theoretical training, all the quiet hours spent studying ballistics and environmental factors, had been preparation for a test she never could have imagined. The scope picture came into focus, revealing a world reduced to crosshairs and the distant figure who represented both opportunity and enormous responsibility. The desert wind shifted again, carrying with it the promise of change and the weight of decisions that would echo far beyond this single moment in time. Maria's world narrowed to the circle of glass that held her target's life in its crosshairs. The rifle felt different than anything she had trained with, heavier with responsibility, alive with the accumulated precision of Morrison's countless hours behind this same scope. Her breathing naturally settled into the rhythm that had been drilled into her during years of range training, but this was no controlled environment with known distances and predictable conditions. This was the moment when theoretical knowledge would either prove sufficient or catastrophically inadequate. Brooks' voice reached her through the scope picture, steady and professional despite the unprecedented nature of their situation. Wind holding steady at 2 miles per hour northwest. Range 870 meters. Target is stationary, good exposure, clear background. His calculations flowed with the practiced ease of someone who had made these assessments hundreds of times, though never for a shooter he had met only hours before. Trust was being built in real time, forged by necessity rather than the usual months of training together. The target stood in perfect profile, his conversation with subordinates creating the kind of opportunity that snipers waited entire deployments to encounter. Intelligence intercepts confirmed his identity beyond any doubt, and the moral clarity of the situation provided a foundation that steadied Maria's resolve. This wasn't about proving herself or making a statement about gender equality in combat roles. This was about stopping someone whose continued existence would directly result in the deaths of innocent people who deserved protection. Sullivan's communication updates took on new urgency as multiple surveillance assets reported changes in the tactical situation. Command reports possible counter-surveillance activity on the northern ridge. We may have been spotted. Recommend immediate action if action is going to be taken. His words carried the weight of someone who understood that windows of opportunity in combat operations opened and closed with brutal finality, often never presenting themselves again. Maria felt the familiar sensation of time slowing down, that marked moments of absolute concentration. The tremor in her hands that might have been expected under such pressure simply wasn't there. Her body seemed to understand instinctively what her mind was still processing, that this was the culmination of every hour spent on shooting ranges, every lesson absorbed about ballistics and environmental factors, every quiet moment spent visualizing perfect shots under impossible conditions. Brooks continued his spotting with the calm precision that had made him legendary among his peers. Mirage is building from the valley floor, slight heat distortion affecting the lower third of your sight picture. Adjust your hold 1 minute left to compensate for the wind shift I'm seeing in the dust patterns near the target building. His guidance flowed naturally, as if they had been working together for years rather than minutes. The weight of Morrison's trust pressed down on Maria like a physical force, but rather than crushing her resolve, it seemed to strengthen her focus. Here was a man who had built his reputation on never missing when it mattered, stepping aside to place the success of the mission above his own professional pride. That level of selfless leadership created an obligation that transcended personal fear or doubt about her capabilities. The target moved slightly, adjusting his position in a way that improved the shooting angle while maintaining his exposure in the compound courtyard. The movement seemed almost choreographed, as if the universe was aligning to create the perfect opportunity for justice to be delivered across nearly 900 meters of hostile terrain. Maria's crosshairs tracked the movement smoothly, her muscle memory taking over from conscious thought. Sullivan's voice cut through the tension with another critical update. Aerial surveillance reports vehicle movement approaching the compound from the east. Estimate 3 minutes before potential exfiltration begins. This is our window. The communication specialist's training kept his delivery professional, but everyone could hear the underlying message. Act now or watch the opportunity disappear forever. Brooks made final adjustments to his spotting calculations. His years of experience distilling complex environmental factors into simple guidance that could be acted upon instantly. Temperature spike is affecting bullet performance, negligible at this range but worth noting. Wind is holding steady, no significant changes in the last 30 seconds. You have a perfect shooting solution if you're ready to take it. Maria's finger found the trigger with the natural precision that marks someone who had internalized proper shooting fundamentals through countless hours of practice. The rifle's trigger broke cleanly under consistent pressure, exactly as it should, with no jerking motion that might disturb the sight picture. Her breathing paused at the natural respiratory pause that created the moment of maximum stability for precision shooting. The world seemed to hold its breath as the bullet began its journey across the valley, carrying with it not just kinetic energy but the hopes of countless people who would never know that their safety had depended on this single moment of perfect execution. Physics took over from human will, ballistic coefficients and atmospheric conditions combining to determine whether months of preparation would prove sufficient for this ultimate test. Brooks maintained his observation through the spotting scope, tracking the bullet's flight path and preparing to call corrections if a follow-up shot became necessary. His professional calm never wavered, though internally he was calculating the probability of success for a shot that would challenge even the most experienced marksman under these conditions. Everything depended on whether natural ability could overcome the lack of combat experience. The flight time at extreme range created a moment of suspended animation where success or failure hung in the balance, determined by factors that were now beyond human control. Maria remained motionless behind the rifle, her eyes still pressed to the scope, watching the target area for the confirmation that would either validate Brooks' faith in her abilities or condemn their decision to ignore established protocols. Sullivan monitored multiple communication channels simultaneously, ready to report mission results to higher command elements that were coordinating broader operations based on the assumption that this critical target would be neutralized. The young Marine understood that success here would ripple outward to affect countless other missions, while failure would close doors and eliminate opportunities that might never present themselves again. The bullet found its mark with the authority of perfect ballistic precision, striking the target center mass with an impact that was immediately visible through the spotting scope. Brooks confirmed the hit with the professional satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed the successful completion of an impossible mission. Target down, clean hit, no movement. Mission accomplished. His voice carried the quiet pride of a craftsman who had just seen his guidance result in flawless execution. Maria remained behind the rifle for several seconds longer, processing what had just occurred while her training kept her ready for potential follow-up shots. The scope picture showed the target motionless on the ground while his associates scattered in confusion, their carefully planned meeting transformed into chaos by a single bullet delivered from nearly a kilometer away. The moral weight of taking a human life, even one that represented a clear threat to innocent people, settled over her with the gravity it deserved. Morrison stepped forward, his face showing a mixture of professional respect and personal amazement at what he had just witnessed. The man who had built his career on precision shooting had just seen someone with no combat experience deliver a shot that he himself had been unable to make when it mattered most. Outstanding work, Castellanos. That was textbook precision under impossible conditions. His acknowledgement carried the weight of someone who understood exactly how difficult what she had accomplished truly was. The immediate aftermath brought a flurry of communication activity as surveillance assets confirmed the target's elimination and began tracking the dispersal of his associates. Sullivan coordinated with multiple command elements, providing situation reports that would inform decisions about follow-up operations and resource allocation. The successful completion of this mission had implications that reached far beyond their small team. Brooks began the methodical process of documenting the shot for official records, measurements and conditions that would become part of the permanent record of precision shooting achievements. 870 meters, cold bore, single shot, perfect conditions, he noted, though everyone involved understood that the conditions had been anything but perfect when human factors were considered. As the immediate tactical situation stabilized, Maria found herself surrounded by professionals who had just witnessed something that challenged their fundamental assumptions about training, experience, and who belonged behind a precision rifle when lives were at stake. Their respect was evident not just in words, but in the way they began, including her in post-mission discussions as an equal rather than an observer. Command confirmation came through Sullivan's communication equipment, validating the target elimination and praising the team's performance under challenging conditions. The successful completion of this mission would prevent numerous planned attacks, saving lives that would never know how close they had come to danger. That knowledge provided a moral foundation that justified the difficult decision to break protocol when circumstances demanded extraordinary action. Morrison retrieved his rifle with the kind of careful attention that marked someone who understood the value of precision equipment, but his demeanor had changed fundamentally. The man who had stepped aside when his body failed him at the critical moment had demonstrated a kind of leadership that transcended personal pride or professional reputation. His willingness to trust someone else with the most important shot of the mission had made success possible when rigid adherence to protocol would have resulted in failure. The team began their methodical post-mission procedures, cleaning equipment, documenting lessons learned, and preparing reports that would inform future operations. But the atmosphere had shifted in ways that went far beyond the successful completion of a difficult mission. They had learned something profound about the nature of leadership, trust, and the courage required to make unprecedented decisions when conventional approaches proved inadequate. Brooks approached Maria as she prepared to return the rifle to Morrison's care, his expression showing the kind of respect that could only be earned through demonstrated performance under pressure. "You've got natural ability that most people never develop even with years of training. Consider expanding your role beyond observation. The teams need people who can perform when everything else falls apart." His suggestion carried the weight of someone whose opinion mattered in the world of precision shooting. As the sun began its descent toward the desert horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Maria reflected on a day that had transformed her understanding of her own capabilities and the nature of courage under extreme pressure. She had arrived as an observer, dismissed by some as just another analyst collecting data for reports that might never be read. She was leaving as someone who had proven that when lives hung in the balance, natural ability and moral courage could overcome lack of experience and conventional expectations. The desert wind that had whispered secrets throughout the day now carried with it the satisfaction of justice delivered and lives preserved through the application of perfect precision when it mattered most. The legend of this day would spread through military circles not as a story about breaking protocol or challenging gender roles, but as a testament to the truth that courage and capability can emerge from the most unexpected sources when circumstances demand excellence from whoever is willing to step forward and accept the responsibility. In the end, the story wasn't about who was supposed to take the shot, but about who could take the shot when everything else had failed. Maria had proven that sometimes the person who can deliver when it matters most isn't the one with the most training or experience, but the one whose body and mind remain steady when others falter under pressure. The desert had witnessed the birth of a new kind of legend, one built not on years of preparation but on the courage to act when action was desperately needed and failure was not an option. The aftermath of the shot rippled through Forward Operating Base Serpent like shockwaves from an earthquake, subtle but unmistakable in their impact on everyone who witnessed what had just occurred. Within hours, word had spread through the entire base that the impossible had happened. An untested observer had delivered a precision shot that legendary marksmen had been unable to make when it mattered most. The story wasn't being told with disbelief or skepticism, but with the kind of reverent respect reserved for moments when the extraordinary becomes reality. Colonel Sarah Mitchell arrived at the sniper team's position just as the sun began painting the desert sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. Her presence commanded immediate attention, not just because of her rank but because of her reputation as someone who had risen through the ranks by recognizing talent wherever it existed and nurturing it regardless of conventional expectations. She had heard the initial reports over the command net, but she needed to see for herself the people involved in what would certainly become one of the most discussed missions of the deployment. Morrison stood at attention as the colonel approached, though his bearing carried none of the defeated posture that might be expected from someone whose performance had faltered at the critical moment. Instead, he projected the quiet confidence of a leader who had made the right decision under impossible circumstances, placing mission success above personal pride in a way that demonstrated the highest levels of military professionalism. His willingness to step aside when his body betrayed him had ultimately enabled success where rigid adherence to protocol would have guaranteed failure. Brooks maintained his professional demeanor while internally processing the implications of what they had just accomplished. Years of partnership with Morrison had taught him to recognize the signs of stress-induced performance degradation, but his decision to recommend Maria for the shot had been based on more than just elimination of alternatives. He had seen something in her approach to environmental observation that suggested natural ability of the highest order, instincts that couldn't be taught but could be recognized by those experienced enough to know what to look for. Sullivan continued monitoring communication channels with renewed intensity, understanding that their mission success was already generating requests for detailed after-action reports from multiple command levels. The young Marine's role in coordinating information flow during the critical moments had been flawless, demonstrating the kind of cool professionalism that marked him as someone destined for leadership positions in future operations. His ability to maintain communication discipline while the team made unprecedented decisions had been crucial to their success. Colonel Mitchell's first words carried the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions based on incomplete information and uncertain circumstances. "I need to understand exactly what happened here today, and I need to understand it from all perspectives." Her tone wasn't accusatory but investigative, seeking truth rather than assigning blame or praise prematurely. The implications of allowing an untested observer to take a critical shot violated so many established protocols that careful analysis was essential before any conclusions could be drawn. Maria found herself the focus of attention from the most senior officers she had ever encountered in a combat zone, but rather than feeling intimidated, she experienced a sense of calm that surprised her with its intensity. The same clarity that had enabled her to make an impossible shot now helped her articulate exactly what had occurred without embellishment or false modesty. "Ma'am, I was given an opportunity to contribute when standard approaches weren't working. I tried to apply my training to an unprecedented situation." The colonel's evaluation of Maria was thorough and professional, recognizing immediately that this wasn't someone seeking attention or trying to make a statement about capabilities or gender roles in combat positions. Here was a soldier who had simply responded to circumstances by applying her skills when they were desperately needed, without regard for personal consequences or career implications. That kind of selfless focus on mission accomplishment was exactly the quality that the military needed to cultivate and reward. Morrison stepped forward to provide his perspective on the decision-making process that had led to such an unconventional solution. "Ma'am, Sergeant Brooks recognized abilities that I was too focused on my own problems to see clearly. When my performance degraded under pressure, he identified an alternative that ultimately enabled mission success. The decision to recommend Castellanos was based on observed capabilities, not desperation or lack of options." Brooks added his own professional assessment, drawing on years of experience in evaluating marksman potential under various conditions. "Colonel, she demonstrated natural wind-reading ability throughout the morning, along with the kind of physiological control that can't be taught. When Sergeant Morrison experienced stress-induced performance issues, she represented our best chance for mission accomplishment based on observable capabilities rather than theoretical qualifications." The colonel absorbed these explanations while simultaneously processing the broader implications of what had occurred. Military success often depended on the ability to adapt when circumstances didn't match established procedures. But the decision to allow an observer to attempt a critical shot pushed the boundaries of acceptable risk management. Yet the results spoke for themselves. Mission accomplished, target eliminated, no collateral damage, and valuable intelligence gathered about unconventional approaches to tactical problems. Sullivan provided technical details about the communication aspects of the mission, demonstrating how information flow had been maintained despite the unprecedented nature of their tactical solution. His ability to coordinate between multiple command levels while the team made real-time adjustments to their standard operating procedures had been crucial to overall success. The young Marine's performance under pressure suggested leadership potential that warranted further development and expanded responsibilities. As the colonel continued her evaluation, other members of the base began arriving to witness what was clearly becoming a significant moment in the deployment's history. Word had spread through informal channels that something extraordinary had occurred at the sniper position, though the specific details remained unclear to most observers. The gathering crowd represented a cross-section of military specialties, all drawn by curiosity about an event that was already generating discussion throughout the base. Maria recognized several faces among the arriving personnel, soldiers she had encountered during her brief time on the base who had dismissed her presence as routine administrative overhead. Their expressions now showed a mixture of confusion and growing respect as they began to understand that the woman they had barely noticed was somehow central to a mission success that would have significant operational implications for the entire deployment. The colonel's questions became more specific as she delved into the technical aspects of the shot itself, seeking to understand not just what had happened but how it had been possible under such challenging conditions. Her military experience had taught her to recognize exceptional performance when she encountered it. But this situation presented variables that went far beyond her previous experience, with personnel evaluation and capability assessment. Brooks provided detailed ballistic analysis of the shot, explaining the environmental factors that had made it so challenging and the technical precision required for success at extreme range under combat conditions. His professional assessment carried the weight of someone whose opinion was respected throughout the precision shooting community, making his endorsement of Maria's natural abilities particularly significant for future personnel decisions. Morrison added his perspective on the leadership aspects of the situation, emphasizing how the team had functioned as a unit despite the unprecedented nature of their tactical solution. His willingness to acknowledge his own performance limitations while supporting his teammates' innovative approach demonstrated the kind of mature leadership that the military valued most highly. Personal ego had been subordinated to mission requirements in a way that enabled success where conventional approaches had failed. As the discussion continued, it became clear that this incident would have implications far beyond the immediate tactical success they had achieved. The colonel was already considering how the lessons learned might be applied to future operations, training programs, and personnel utilization policies. The demonstration that exceptional capability could emerge from unexpected sources when circumstances demanded excellence had profound implications for military human resource management. Sullivan's communication equipment began receiving priority messages from higher command levels, indicating that news of their mission success was generating interest at levels far above the local base command structure. The successful elimination of such a high-value target through unconventional means was exactly the kind of adaptability and innovation that senior military leaders wanted to understand and potentially replicate in other operational contexts. The colonel made her decision with the kind of clarity that had marked her rise through military ranks, where hesitation often meant failure and decisive action usually led to success. Castellanos. Effective, immediately you're being reassigned to precision shooting training with full command endorsement. Your natural abilities need to be developed through proper training and experience. This base and this war need people who can perform when conventional approaches fail. The announcement sent ripples through the gathered personnel, not because it was unprecedented for someone to receive field promotions or reassignments based on demonstrated capability, but because it represented recognition that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances when opportunity met preparation and courage. Maria's journey from observer to precision shooter would become a story that inspired others to look beyond conventional qualifications when evaluating human potential. Morrison stepped forward to offer his personal endorsement of the colonel's decision, his professional reputation adding weight to what might otherwise seem like an impulsive choice. "Ma'am, I'll personally ensure that Castellanos receives the advanced training she needs to develop her natural abilities. Today proved that raw talent combined with proper guidance can achieve results that years of conventional training might never produce." Brooks added his commitment to the training process, recognizing that his role in identifying Maria's potential created an obligation to help develop those abilities to their full extent. "Colonel, I've worked with precision shooters at every level of experience and capability. What I saw today represents the kind of natural ability that appears maybe once in a career. With proper development, she could become one of the most effective marksmen in theater." The crowd that had gathered to witness this unusual personnel discussion began to disperse, but their conversations would continue long into the evening as word spread throughout the base about the day's events. Maria's story would be retold countless times, growing in detail and significance with each retelling, eventually becoming the kind of legend that inspired young soldiers to believe that exceptional performance was possible when courage met opportunity. As the official discussions concluded and the colonel departed to begin the administrative processes required for Maria's reassignment, the sniper team found themselves alone again in the gathering desert twilight. The day that had begun with routine observation duties had transformed into a life-changing experience that would define the remainder of their deployment and potentially their entire military careers. Maria looked out across the valley where her shot had found its target, understanding that her life had fundamentally changed in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. The rifle that had felt so foreign in her hands hours earlier now seemed like a natural extension of her will, a precision instrument that had enabled her to contribute to something far greater than personal achievement. The responsibility that came with such capability was both humbling and inspiring. Morrison began the process of transitioning his role from primary marksman to mentor and trainer, recognizing that his greatest contribution to the mission might not be his own shooting, but his ability to help develop exceptional talent when he encountered it. The day's events had taught him profound lessons about leadership, adaptability, and the courage required to make difficult decisions when lives hung in the balance. Brooks reflected on his crucial role in recognizing potential where others saw only inexperience, understanding that his years of experience had prepared him not just to execute precision shots, but to identify and nurture the next generation of elite marksmen. His decision to recommend Maria for the critical shot would be studied and analyzed by military leadership experts as an example of how experienced professionals could adapt to unprecedented circumstances. Sullivan continued his communication duties with renewed appreciation for how individual contributions combined to create mission success, understanding that his role in maintaining information flow during the crisis had been just as crucial as the technical aspects of precision shooting. The young Marine had witnessed firsthand how exceptional teams functioned when conventional procedures proved inadequate for the challenges they faced. As darkness settled over Forward Operating Base Serpent, the legend of Maria Castellanos began its journey from witnessed fact to military folklore. Her story would be told in training facilities, briefing rooms, and operational planning sessions as an example of how extraordinary performance could emerge when courage, natural ability, and proper support combined under the pressure of real-world consequences. The quiet observer who had arrived that morning was leaving as a precision shooter whose first combat engagement had already earned a place in the annals of military marksmanship history. The desert wind that had carried the sound of her perfect shot across the valley now whispered the promise of future achievements, future challenges, and the ongoing responsibility to serve with excellence when others depended on her precision and courage. Maria had discovered not just her own capabilities but her calling, and the war would never be the same because of it. 6 months later, the advanced marksmanship training facility at Camp Lejeune buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt in years. Maria stood before a class of Marine recruits, her instructor credentials newly earned but her reputation already legendary throughout the precision shooting community. The story of her impossible shot at Forward Operating Base Serpent had traveled through military circles like wildfire, inspiring a new generation of marksmen who understood that excellence could emerge from the most unexpected circumstances when courage met opportunity. The shooting range stretched before them like a canvas of possibility, targets positioned at distances that would challenge even experienced shooters. Maria's students represented the future of military precision shooting, young Marines who had volunteered for the most demanding training program in the Corps because they had heard about an instructor who could teach them not just technique, but the mental fortitude required to perform when failure meant lives lost and success meant justice delivered. Her teaching methodology had evolved from those crucial moments in the desert, combining traditional marksmanship fundamentals with revolutionary approaches to stress management and environmental awareness. Maria understood that shooting skills were only part of the equation. The mental game was what separated good marksmen from legendary ones. Her students learned to read wind patterns like ancient languages, to find calm within chaos, and to trust their instincts when conventional wisdom proved inadequate. The transformation in Maria's own capabilities had been remarkable to witness. Under Morrison's mentorship and Brooks' technical guidance, She had developed from a naturally gifted amateur into a precision shooting instructor, whose methods were already being studied and replicated at training facilities across multiple branches of the military. Her unique perspective as someone who had entered the field from outside traditional pathways brought fresh insights to age-old challenges. Today's training scenario presented the kind of complex challenge that simulated real-world conditions, where textbook solutions rarely applied. Multiple targets at varying distances, changing environmental conditions, and time pressure that forced students to make critical decisions without the luxury of extended analysis. Maria moved among her students like a conductor guiding an orchestra, offering guidance that helped them discover their own capabilities rather than simply following prescribed procedures. Private Jennifer Hayes struggled with a particularly challenging shot, her frustration evident in the tension that had crept into her shoulders and the slight tremor that was affecting her sight picture. Maria recognized the signs immediately, having experienced similar challenges during her own rapid development as a marksman. The instructor's approach was patient but firm, drawing on hard-won experience about how mental barriers could be overcome through proper technique and confident mindset. "The rifle doesn't know you're nervous," Maria said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough to reach Hayes without disturbing other students. "It only responds to what you do with your hands, your breathing, and your focus. Trust the fundamentals we've practiced, and let your natural ability take over from conscious thought." Her guidance carried the weight of someone who had learned these lessons under the most extreme circumstances possible. The breakthrough came gradually, as Hayes began to apply the mental techniques that Maria had developed through her own experience with pressure shooting. The student's breathing settled into the controlled rhythm that marked experienced marksmen, her grip relaxed to the point where the rifle became an extension of her will rather than a foreign tool she was fighting to control. The shot, when it finally came, struck the target with authority that surprised everyone except Maria, who had seen the same potential in Hayes that Brooks had once recognized in her. Corporal Marcus Thompson represented a different kind of challenge, a naturally gifted shooter whose technical skills were already exceptional, but whose confidence had been shaken by a recent training failure. Maria understood the psychological aspects of precision shooting in ways that traditional instructors often missed, having experienced firsthand how mental barriers could sabotage even the most skilled marksmen when pressure mounted beyond normal levels. Her work with Thompson drew heavily on lessons learned from Morrison's experience during that crucial mission, when physiological stress response had temporarily robbed a legendary marksman of the abilities that had defined his career. Maria taught her students not just how to shoot accurately, but how to maintain that accuracy when their bodies and minds were fighting against the very precision they were trying to achieve. The transformation was evident as Thompson began to internalize the mental management techniques that Maria had developed through her own rapid evolution from observer to elite marksman. His shots became more consistent, his confidence rebuilt on a foundation of understanding rather than just natural ability. The young Marine was learning that true mastery came not from never experiencing pressure, but from performing excellently despite that pressure. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez arrived at the range carrying news that would test everything Maria had learned about leadership and responsibility in the months since her legendary shot. Intelligence had identified another high-value target, this time in a different theater of operations, where environmental conditions and tactical constraints would present challenges that pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible even for the most elite marksmen. The mission briefing revealed complexities that made Maria's original shot seem simple by comparison. Extreme range in urban terrain, multiple environmental variables, and time constraints that would allow for only one attempt at neutralizing a target whose continued existence posed imminent threats to coalition forces and innocent civilians. The shot would require not just technical precision, but the kind of mental fortitude that could only be developed through experience with high-stakes situations. Maria's selection for the mission represented validation of her transformation from accidental hero to proven professional, but it also carried implications that extended far beyond personal achievement. Her success or failure would influence policies about rapid advancement, unconventional training pathways, and the military's willingness to recognize and develop exceptional talent regardless of traditional qualification requirements. The preparation phase drew on every lesson learned during her intensive training period, combining Morrison's technical expertise with Brooks' environmental assessment capabilities and her own intuitive understanding of how to perform under extreme pressure. The team that had enabled her original success was being reassembled for a mission that would either confirm her place among elite marksmen or expose the limitations of accelerated development programs. Morrison's role had evolved from mentor to partner, recognizing that Maria's unique perspective and natural abilities had developed to the point where she could contribute insights that even experienced professionals might miss. His willingness to continue learning from someone he had originally trained demonstrated the kind of intellectual humility that marked truly great military leaders. Brooks brought his legendary spotting skills to bear on environmental analysis that would determine success or failure for the upcoming mission. His calculations had to account for urban heat effects, wind patterns disrupted by buildings, and atmospheric conditions that changed rapidly in metropolitan environments. The complexity of the shooting solution would challenge every aspect of their partnership. Sullivan's communication responsibilities had expanded to include coordination between multiple intelligence sources, aerial surveillance platforms, and ground units, whose movements had to be synchronized with the precision shooting team's activities. His growth from nervous young Marine to confident communications specialist exemplified the kind of professional development that the military needed to encourage and reward. The mission location presented challenges that would test every aspect of Maria's training and experience. Urban terrain meant that environmental conditions could change rapidly and unpredictably, with wind patterns affected by building shapes and thermal effects that created complex atmospheric conditions. The target would be exposed for only brief moments, requiring split-second decision-making and flawless execution under pressure that exceeded anything she had previously experienced. Advanced preparation included studying architectural plans, weather patterns, and intelligence reports that painted a picture of tactical complexity beyond anything the team had previously encountered. Success would require not just individual excellence, but seamless coordination between team members who trusted each other completely, despite the unprecedented nature of the challenges they were facing. The flight to the operational area provided time for final mental preparation, as Maria reviewed every aspect of the mission while simultaneously managing the psychological pressure that came with knowing that lives depended on her ability to perform flawlessly when the moment arrived. Her transformation from observer to elite marksman was about to face its ultimate test in conditions that would challenge every skill she had developed. Brooks conducted final equipment checks with the obsessive attention to detail that had made him legendary among precision shooting professionals, understanding that the margin for error in urban environments was even smaller than in desert conditions. Every scope adjustment, every environmental calculation, every backup system had to be perfect because there would be no opportunity for corrections if something went wrong. Morrison prepared for his role as team leader and backup shooter, recognizing that urban environments presented unique challenges that could affect even the most experienced marksmen in unexpected ways. His experience provided a foundation of confidence for the team, but he also understood that this mission would require adapting proven techniques to unprecedented circumstances. The insertion went smoothly, with the team establishing their position in an urban environment that presented both opportunities and challenges for precision shooting. The elevation advantage provided clear sightlines to the target area, but urban atmospheric conditions created environmental variables that would test every aspect of their training and experience. Initial observations confirmed the complexity of the shooting solution, with wind patterns disrupted by building configurations and thermal effects that created constantly changing atmospheric conditions. Maria's natural ability to read environmental factors would be crucial for success, but the urban environment presented variables that even her intuitive understanding would struggle to interpret accurately. Intelligence updates confirmed the target's presence and movement patterns, creating a narrow window of opportunity that would require perfect timing and flawless execution. The tactical situation was developing exactly as planned, but everyone involved understood that real-world operations rarely proceeded according to theoretical expectations when human lives and complex environments were involved. Brooks began his spotting routine with the same professional calm that had enabled their previous success, but his calculations had to account for urban environmental factors that created unprecedented complexity in ballistic solutions. Wind effects, thermal layers, and atmospheric disturbances combined to create shooting conditions that would challenge the most advanced targeting systems, much less human marksmen relying on experience and intuition. Maria settled behind her rifle with the confidence that came from months of intensive training and successful mission experience, but she also carried the humility of someone who understood that each new challenge presented unique obstacles that required adaptation rather than simple application of previously learned techniques. The urban environment was testing every aspect of her development as a precision marksman. The target appeared exactly as intelligence had predicted, but the shooting solution required split-second adaptation to environmental conditions that were changing, even as Maria acquired her sight picture. Urban wind patterns, thermal effects, and atmospheric disturbances combined to create the most challenging shot of her rapidly developing career as an elite marksman. The moment of truth arrived with the same crystalline clarity that had marked her original legendary shot. But the complexity of urban environmental factors required an intuitive understanding that went beyond technical training to encompass the kind of natural ability that couldn't be taught or replicated through conventional methods. Maria's finger found the trigger with the confidence of someone who had learned to trust her instincts when theoretical knowledge proved inadequate for real-world challenges. The shot broke clean and true, carrying across urban terrain with the authority of perfect ballistic precision guided by human intuition that had been honed through experience but powered by natural ability that marked truly exceptional marksmen. The target fell with finality that confirmed mission success and validated every aspect of Maria's transformation from accidental hero to proven professional. The confirmation came through Brooks, spotting scope with the professional satisfaction of someone who had just witnessed the successful completion of an impossible mission under conditions that would have challenged the most experienced precision shooting teams. Maria's second legendary shot had proven that her original success hadn't been luck or circumstance, but the emergence of exceptional capability that could be developed and refined through proper training and experience. As the team prepared for extraction, Maria reflected on a journey that had taken her from observer to instructor to proven combat marksman in less than a year. Her story would inspire future generations of military personnel to believe that excellence could emerge from unexpected circumstances when natural ability met proper training, and the courage to act when lives depended on perfect performance under impossible conditions. 2 years after that life-changing moment in the desert, Maria stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee in Washington, D.C., her uniform bearing decorations that told the story of extraordinary service and unprecedented achievement. The hearing room was packed with military officials, defense contractors, and journalists who had come to witness testimony about revolutionary changes in military training programs inspired by her remarkable journey from observer to elite marksman. Her presence at this level of military discourse represented a transformation not just in her own career, but in how the armed forces evaluated and developed human potential. Senator Patricia Williams, the committee chairwoman, opened the proceedings with words that acknowledged the significance of what Maria's story represented for military personnel policies. Staff Sergeant Castellanos, your experience has challenged fundamental assumptions about training pathways, talent identification, and the development of specialized capabilities within our armed forces. We're here today to understand how your unique journey can inform better practices for identifying and nurturing exceptional ability wherever it may be found. Maria's testimony drew on experiences that span multiple theaters of operation, dozens of successful missions, and the development of training programs that were already producing a new generation of precision marksmen whose capabilities exceeded traditional expectations. Her voice carried the confidence of someone who had proven herself under the most extreme circumstances, while maintaining the humility of someone who understood that her success had been built on the foundation of exceptional teammates and mentors. The questions from committee members revealed the broader implications of her story from military human resource management, training budget allocation, and policies governing rapid advancement based on demonstrated capability rather than conventional qualification timelines. Senator Robert Hayes pressed for specific details about how natural ability could be identified and developed more effectively throughout the military establishment. Senator, my experience suggests that we've been underutilizing human potential by adhering too rigidly to traditional pathways for developing specialized capabilities, Maria responded. Natural ability exists throughout our ranks, but it often goes unrecognized because we're not looking for it in the right places or providing opportunities for it to emerge. The key is creating environments where exceptional performance can be demonstrated and then supported through proper development programs. General Michael Thompson, the Army's Chief of Staff for Personnel, provided statistical evidence about the success rates of training programs that had incorporated lessons learned from Maria's rapid development. Committee members, we've seen 40% improvement in advanced marksmanship course completion rates and 60% better performance scores when we apply identification and development techniques inspired by Sergeant Castellanos' experience. These aren't marginal improvements. They represent fundamental advances in how we develop human capabilities. The discussion shifted to budgetary implications, with committee members seeking to understand the cost-effectiveness of accelerated development programs compared to traditional training approaches. Maria's testimony emphasized that investing in proper identification and development of natural ability actually reduced overall training costs while producing superior results, a finding that had significant implications for defense spending and resource allocation decisions. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, the Defense Department's chief psychologist, presented research findings about the mental and physiological factors that enabled some individuals to perform exceptionally under extreme pressure, while others with similar technical training struggled with stress-induced performance degradation. Our studies confirm that Staff Sergeant Castellanos possesses a rare combination of physiological stress tolerance and cognitive processing speed that allows her to maintain precision when others experience performance breakdown. The hearing's focus expanded to discuss how these insights could be applied across multiple military specialties beyond precision shooting, with implications for pilot training, special operations selection, and leadership development programs. Maria's story had become a case study in human potential that was influencing military personnel policies at the highest levels of government and defense establishment decision-making. Senator Williams pressed for details about the mentorship aspects of Maria's development, recognizing that Morrison's willingness to step aside and Brooks' ability to identify potential had been crucial factors in her success. The human element in talent development cannot be overlooked, Maria emphasized. Having mentors who were secure enough in their own abilities to recognize and nurture talent in others was essential to my development. We need to reward and encourage this kind of leadership throughout our military structure. The testimony continued with discussion of how Maria's teaching methods at the Advanced Marksmanship School had produced measurable improvements in student performance, with graduation rates and skill assessments showing significant improvements compared to traditional instructional approaches. Her unique perspective as someone who had developed from outside conventional pathways brought fresh insights to age-old training challenges. Committee members explored the broader implications for military culture, particularly regarding opportunities for personnel who didn't fit traditional molds but possessed exceptional capabilities that could contribute to mission success. Maria's experience had sparked discussions about diversity of thought, background, and experience as strategic advantages rather than administrative complications. The afternoon session focused on specific policy recommendations that had emerged from studying Maria's development and subsequent success. These included revised personnel evaluation criteria, expanded mentorship programs, and new pathways for rapid advancement based on demonstrated capability rather than time and grade requirements. The potential impact on military effectiveness was substantial enough to warrant significant changes in how the armed forces identified and developed human talent. Following the formal hearing, Maria found herself in smaller meetings with defense officials who were working to implement policy changes inspired by her experience. The conversations revealed how her story had resonated throughout the military establishment, inspiring leaders at every level to reconsider their assumptions about human potential and the best methods for developing it. That evening, Maria returned to her hotel room to find a video message from her former students at Camp Lejeune, now deployed to various theaters of operation where they were applying the lessons learned during their training. Private Hayes, who had struggled with confidence during those early days on the range, was now a squad-designated marksman whose performance had saved lives during recent combat operations. Her transformation exemplified the broader impact of teaching methods that emphasized mental resilience alongside technical skill development. Corporal Thompson had been selected for advanced sniper training based on his exceptional performance in combat situations, validating Maria's assessment of his potential despite his earlier struggles with confidence. His success demonstrated that proper mentorship and training could overcome psychological barriers that might otherwise limit the development of natural ability. The video messages continued with updates from dozens of other students whose careers had been influenced by training methods that emphasized adaptability, mental resilience, and trust in natural ability when circumstances demanded exceptional performance. Their collective success represented a multiplication of impact that extended far beyond Maria's individual achievements. A surprise appearance in the video came from Morrison, now serving as the Commandant of the Marine Corps' premier sniper school, where he was implementing training programs based on lessons learned from their shared experiences. His message acknowledged that stepping aside during that crucial moment in the desert had been one of the most important leadership decisions of his career, enabling success while teaching him valuable lessons about recognizing and nurturing talent in others. Brooks appeared next, his role as chief instructor for advanced spotting techniques allowing him to pass on hard-won expertise about identifying and developing the subtle skills that separated good marksmen from exceptional ones. His ability to recognize Maria's potential during those crucial moments had become a case study in talent identification that was being taught throughout military training establishments. Sullivan, now a communications specialist with Special Operations Forces, credited his experience during that desert mission with teaching him about leadership under pressure and the importance of maintaining focus on mission success, regardless of how unconventional the methods required might be. His growth from nervous young Marine to confident professional exemplified the kind of development that the military needed to encourage and reward. The video concluded with a message from Colonel Mitchell, who had been promoted to general and was now overseeing implementation of new personnel policies inspired by Maria's experience. Your story has changed how we think about human potential and our responsibility to identify and develop it wherever we find it. The impact extends far beyond any individual mission or achievement. It's about creating a military culture that recognizes excellence and provides opportunities for it to flourish. As Maria prepared for her return to active duty, she reflected on how her journey had evolved from personal transformation to institutional change that was affecting countless military careers. Her experience had demonstrated that exceptional performance could emerge from unexpected circumstances when natural ability met proper development, and the courage to act when conventional approaches proved inadequate. The policy changes emerging from her testimony would create opportunities for future generations of military personnel who possessed exceptional capabilities but might not fit traditional development pathways. Enhanced talent identification programs, accelerated training tracks, and expanded mentorship opportunities would ensure that natural ability could be recognized and developed regardless of conventional qualification timelines. Her next assignment would take her to the Pentagon, where she would work directly with military leadership to refine and implement these new approaches to human capital development. The role represented recognition that her value extended beyond individual performance to include insights about systematic improvement in how the military identified and nurtured exceptional capability throughout its ranks. The morning news carried reports about the Senate hearing, with defense analysts noting that Maria's testimony had provided concrete evidence for the effectiveness of innovative approaches to military training and personnel development. Her story was being studied not just within military circles, but by corporate leadership development programs, educational institutions, and other organizations seeking to better identify and develop human potential. International military observers had also taken notice, with allied forces requesting briefings about training methods and personnel policies that had enabled such remarkable individual development and institutional improvement. Maria's experience was becoming a blueprint for optimizing human performance under extreme pressure, while maintaining the adaptability necessary for success in unpredictable operational environments. As she prepared to leave Washington, Maria visited the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, where she reflected on the sacrifices of previous generations who had served when their country needed them most. Her own service felt like a continuation of that tradition, though her contributions involved changing how the military developed and utilized human talent rather than just individual combat achievements. The lessons learned from her journey would continue rippling outward through military institutions, affecting how future leaders thought about potential, development, and the courage required to make unconventional decisions when circumstances demanded excellence from whoever was capable of delivering it. Her legacy would be measured not just in successful missions, but in the careers and capabilities of countless others, whose talents would be recognized and developed because her story had changed institutional approaches to human capital management. Standing before the memorial wall, Maria understood that her transformation from observer to elite marksman to institutional change agent represented something larger than personal achievement. It was proof that excellence could emerge from unexpected circumstances when courage met opportunity, and that individual success could become the foundation for systematic improvements that affected entire organizations and the people they served. The desert wind that had whispered secrets during that first crucial mission now carried the promise of continued service in roles that would leverage her unique experience to help others discover and develop their own exceptional capabilities. Her story had become a testament to the truth that sometimes the most important victories weren't measured in successful missions, but in the positive changes that extended far beyond any individual achievement. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to serve, but tonight Maria carried the satisfaction of knowing that her journey had opened doors for others who possessed exceptional ability but needed the chance to prove themselves when circumstances demanded excellence. The military was becoming a better organization because of lessons learned from her experience, and that impact would continue growing long after her own career had ended. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.